Hi, good evening. Hopefully you can see and hear us. Welcome to the Balliemeanoch Pump Storage Hydro Community Engagement presentation. An opportunity for ILI Group and our consultant ACOM just to set out our proposals for a pump storage hydro scheme within the local area, and give us an opportunity to set out some of the principles behind the project, what we're trying to achieve, and to introduce ourselves really to the local community, and to give you an opportunity to engage with the project and to understand what steps we'll be taking as we look to try and progress this project forward. I suppose firstly, just a couple of points of housekeeping. So we do have an inquiry button. It would be wonderful if anyone who is on, if you could go on there and just note your name. If you're with an organisation or a community council or anything like that, who you're with. And also to use that to raise any questions or queries that you may have. We'd be delighted for you to engage, and we'll obviously try and answer all questions and queries live. Anything we're not able to, we can come back with a full and complete answer, so please do use that function. We are also recording this evening's presentation, so this will be circulated once again. I'll send out an email after the event, and the link that you've used to access this evening, you can use once again. We'll keep this up for an extended period of time. You'll be able to go in, see the presentation again, see the queries, etc. And right at the bottom of the page as well, there is an option to download the presentation. It will be set out this evening. I suppose also we'd like to just say, unfortunately, we're not live in person. Ideally, that's how this would have been presented. It's how we would normally do these things. Clearly, we're in a different world just now with coronavirus and the current restrictions. Hopefully, we are moving away from that, but we're just not quite there yet, hence why this session is online. But this is just the first of, or really the starting point of the process, and we would certainly intend to have in-person events locally as this project progresses, and get to meet people and discuss face-to-face what it is we're doing here. So hopefully this is the one and only time that we have to do this online, as we're doing just now. So why are we here this evening? Well, it's to introduce the proposal we have for our pump storage hydro project. As you'll see, it's the pre-scoping engagement presentation. So that means we haven't formally made any submissions as of yet. We think it's extremely important that the first people we present to are the local community to set out our proposals. Firstly, as a courtesy, but of course, if we're going to be asking that the project is hosted within the local area, then it's extremely important that we do engage with people who live there and will have to be part of the project going forward. So that's why we're hosting the event, just to set out what our hopes are moving forward. So what is pump storage hydro? Well, you're probably a fairly informed community, I would imagine, with Cruachan not so far away. So it is following the exact same concept as Cruachan, in so much as it's effectively a very large water battery, and it will be used to store excess energy on the system and release that as and when it's required, which is going to become an ever more important commodity as we move away from fossil fuels and into a renewable energy world. And of course, we're doing this to tackle climate change and to deal with the issues that have been brought up with that, and to reach carbon neutral and net zero. So it's all very much part of that wider drive and push from the the Scottish and UK governments. So that's why we're here. In terms of how we will conduct this evening. So after the introductions, our CEO, Mark Wilson, will set out just a few points on the company itself and how we've got to where we are and what the kind of aspirations are for this project. We will then pass over to our consultants, our consulting team from AECOM, one of the world's preeminent hydroelectric engineers. We've engaged with them to design and plan this project and help us take that forward. So they'll do a short presentation, just setting out some of the concepts behind pumped storage hydro and what we hope to achieve with this project. And then at the end, we'll have a Q&A session where people will have the opportunity to get any questions, queries, anything at all that they would like to discuss with regards to this project. So please do engage with the session and take advantage of the fact that there are a number of us here live and hoping that you do engage with us. So, in terms of the team that we have with us today, so as I say, we have Mark Wilson, the CEO of ILI. Also myself, Ross McLaughlin, I'm a technical advisor and typically deal with the grid connection and that side of the project. We also have Greg Templeton, our planning lead, who takes care of all matters relating to the planning process for ILI, and John Smith, our land manager, who engages directly with the landowners to secure the necessary rights and permits for the projects. And from AECOM, we have David Lee, who is the project manager. He's also a civil engineer by profession. And James Scott, who will take the lead on the civil engineering side and the engineering design for the project. Vicky, I'm not sure. Vicky is in charge of the environmental side. She's the environmental lead and will head up the team that produces the environmental impact assessment. Although she does pass her apologies, I don't think she could make it this evening. But we do also have Amy Kilgoyne, who will act as a coordinator on AECOM's side and pulling all the various strands together. So that's the team who are present this evening. And as I say, please do take the opportunity to engage with us as the evening progresses. Right, okay, so that's the kind of introductions out of the way. So we'll kick things off in terms of moving to the next step. So I'd like to bring in Mark Wilson, who is the company CEO. So what we'll do just now is we'll just take everyone else out, just so we have Mark in here. Okay, Mark, so I'll pass over to you now if you would like to just give a wee bit of background about ILI and what we're trying to achieve here.
Thank you, Ross. And yes, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time this evening. As Ross said, this is the very beginning, and we want to be able to talk to the community first, and it's really to put your mind at ease, because obviously there'd be, as I fully would understand, there would be fear and trepidation of what's going on here, what's happening in our local area, and I can promise you tonight that what we're doing is a very good thing. Just to give you a bit of background on the company, we've been going 17 years now, the main company, Intelligent Land Investments, and just to understand why we're doing what we're doing. So we started off obviously land investment, and it was working in community growth areas, and we would bring eco homes and affordable homes into the area because there would be a shortage of housing that is needed. We then in 2009 we moved into onshore wind. Now, I know that could put immediate fear in certain people's thinking, and I can understand that when you're looking at industrial scale wind turbines, but what we did was different. We worked on a very small scale, and we worked with the farming community in Scotland, and in areas that you were not going into areas that were really going to have a major impact, because there is a need for this. And what we did was just single turbine, so a single turbine for a farmer. But we worked with, at that time, we worked with over 600 landowners in Scotland, and we got over 90, well, we put 160 sites into planning, and we were able to get 96 consents for farmers all over the country, and that created a 20-year plus revenue stream for them, and we've had some fantastic referrals because of that. But while we were on that journey, sort of 2015, there was an announcement with the government, UK government, that said they were going to close all the coal mines in 2022, 2024, which obviously everyone would see as a good thing with what's going on with climate change. And we seen that as a real sign that there was something that we felt we could do to help. Then there was an announcement with the Paris Agreement that the UK said that they would push to get to net zero by 2050, and the Scottish government put a better target than that for 2045. And that basically means that by that date, there will be no coal or no gas on our electric system. We will be powered 100% by renewable energy. And I know, because we all know, is when we talk to people every day, as well, people will say, well, what do you do? Well, how are we going to do? How are you going to do that? What are you going to do when it's not windy or the sun's not shining? How are we going to, how's it going to work? And that's where you need energy storage. Now, there's different types of energy storage. There's batteries, there's hydrogen. The best form of energy storage, 95% of the world's energy storage is what we're doing, which is pump storage hydro. It is not a new technology. Cruachan, just up the road, it's like 13 kilometers away. That was built and was operational, I think, by 1965. And I'm sure a lot of people on this evening know that and drive past it. Most days you wouldn't know it's there, because as you know, majority of it's underground. So that's essentially what we're doing here at Balliemeanoch, is we're going to build a project that's going to store the excess offshore wind when it's not needed. When there's excess, we're going to store that, and then when there's a need for energy onto the system, we'll be able to put that energy onto the system. And ultimately, we're not going to solve the problem, but we're going to play a part in it. We're going to help the government and the country get to net zero, so that we can go into this future some people say, well, it's not affecting me. It's not, but we've all noticed our summers are getting a lot hotter, and they're going to continue to get a lot hotter. It's going to be our kids that are really going to be affected by this. And that's what it's making a real effort to make sure that they have the same life that we're being fortunate enough to all have. So that's what we're doing. What else can I say about it? As I say, it's just extremely positive. Probably what I'll do is I'll just pass you on to David, because he's the expert when it comes to these things, and AECOM, and then I'll do my best to answer any questions at the end. So yeah, thank you very much for your time, and I will pass you now to David Lee, and he will give you a very clear overview of how the technology works.
Thank you, Mark. That was super. Okay, so that was just an introduction to ILI and what we're trying to achieve in the kind of broader picture of what it is we're trying to do here. So let me just bring Mark out. So I think firstly, James will come in from AECOM just to work through the slides now. Now let me just... get the slideshow just to come up properly.
That was it, Ross.
Oh, was it? It's,
yeah.
Let me
just presentation mode now. There you go. Thanks, Ross. Thanks, Mark. As Ross said in the introduction, I'm James Scott. I'm leading the design on Isley's pump storage projects, and as both Ross and Mark covered, sort of the high level overview of what pump storage is. Here's a schematic that could try and help explain what the technology is. As I said, it's very similar to Crook, and it's not too different at all. But pump storage is the largest technology for storing huge amounts of electricity, and is basically represents two reservoirs at different elevations, creating potential energy. A good analogy is a bathtub and a plug. And if you imagine that the bathtub is your energy size and the volume of the water is your energy storage, and the plug diameter is your power. The more water you store, the more energy you have. The larger your plug, the more power you have. So as I said, Loch is quite a large tail pond, and it's existing impoundment, and we're hopefully planning to utilize that similar to what Cruachan's done. So in this diagram, you can see the upper reservoir and intake at a different elevation to the lower reservoir, and the two are connected via underground tunnels or waterways, and the arrows show the direction of where the water will be flowing during the different modes of operation. So one is the generating modes, like drawing water down from the upper reservoir to the lower reservoir, and the other one is the pumping mode, when you're pumping the water from the lower reservoir back up to the upper reservoir. Next slide, please, Ross. So as Ross and Mark were explaining how pump storage has a key impact on the grid, a positive impact on the grid, here's a sort of quick diagram to explain the philosophy behind it. In green, you can see the potential excess wind. Currently, the UK grid is configured in such a way, if there's too much wind blowing, for example, in the North Sea and the offshore wind, payments are paid to wind turbines to turn it off, and that wind energy is curtailed, i.e. sort of wasted or lost. And if there was pump storage or more storage generally on the grids, that surplus electricity could be stored for when it's really needed, and or there's a increase in demand or lack of supply from the wind farm, particularly low periods of wind. I think we all probably remember the winter of 2010, which was particularly cold and not very windy, and we relied a huge amount on fossil fuels and thermal power. And pump storage and any storage on the grid will assist trying to store surplus electricity and keep it when it's really required. So just turning the tap when the energy is required. So next slide, please, Ross. So onto the project itself. So as Mark said, the project is located about 13 kilometers south of Cruachan, about 8 or 7 kilometers northwest of Inverary. It's mainly located on Balliemeanoch farm, so that's the head where the head pond's located. And to get to the sites, we're looking at two different main access routes. One from the north, I can see sort of just south of Cladach, and one to the south, just through an area, sort of Three Bridges area, and also two areas that are shown on this proposed development boundary in red are the two smaller holdings down around Inverary. They will be used for access and construction access around the town. Next slide, please, Ross. Thanks. So as Mark was saying, the sort of scale of the potential energy storage for pump storage is enormous, and Balliemeanoch could, for example, store around 45,000 megawatt hours per cycle, and a per cycle is sort of a full discharge or draining of the reservoir, and then a full recharge of the reservoir. So that's a movement of 45,000 megawatt hours of electricity, and that could, in one cycle, power 4.5 million homes for a year. And that's this discussion between energy and power comes into it. So the scheme is designed potentially to have an installed capacity of up to 1.5 gigawatts. So normally that's discharging over a 30-hour period. So it's quite a long process. And this is also subject to further site and project investigation that we're going to be carrying out. As mentioned, there's two main access routes from the A819, one from the north at Carrick, one from the south at Three Bridges, and both of them will be hopefully utilised. And around Inverary, there's two access routes that will be planned primarily to ease any construction traffic and take any construction traffic away from the town centre of Inverary. The estimated construction period is about 7 years in total, depending on how bad the weather is up there. And the main construction period, or the peak construction workforce, will be during years 3 and 4. I think the next slide, Ross, will show you the indicative construction programme. Thanks, Ross. So as you can see, we've got at the start, years 1, we've got some further site investigation work we'll be carrying out, and sort of early procurement of the key components of the underground powerhouse. And we've got some early mobilisation into year 2, which will cover sort of access, configuration and construction. And then year 3, 4, 5, 6 are the main civils works, so the main construction of the head pond and the main underground works, which will consist of waterways, tailrace, tunnels, which we'll come on to later. And then into year 7, we've got the commissioning stage of getting the scheme plugged into the grid and the grid connection connected. Next slide, Ross. So the general arrangement of the above ground infrastructure that's proposed for the project is shown here. So we've got Loch on the left hand side, and we've got the inlet outlet structure where we'll be connecting into the Loch, just west of Balliemeanoch Farm. And the pink squares that are shown are the indicative compound locations that will be shown in the above ground infrastructure. The scheme itself mainly comprises of the large head pond that's shown here with 3 impoundments, one larger impoundment to the west, and this is located just upstream of the current Balliemeanoch Dam, which is an existing run-of-river hydro scheme on the site just now. And as you can see, the green lines that are shown are the proposed access tracks that could access the site. So one from the north, one from the south, and then one going down to the existing track on the west. Next slide, please, Ross. So the below ground infrastructure, so the underground tunnels. So the blue show the proposed route of the waterways that will be connecting the head pond to the tail pond via a large diameter tunnel or a series of tunnels. And to access the powerhouse, which will be located below the tail pond or below Loch, will be gained via a construction tunnel and an access tunnel, situated at different locations and different elevations due to their anticipated gradient. So there'll be quite a lot of underground works, and the idea is that the horizons arising from the construction of these features will be used, or the material used will be able to be constructing the head pond embankments. We're anticipating no material to be taken off site, and all of the material generated on site from the operations will be able to be kept on site. Next slide, please, Ross. So here's a better image around Inverary of the 2 access routes I discussed earlier. So one is the north. The proposal of this is to just for general construction traffic So there's an existing track there through the woods, just north of Inverary Castle, and the idea is to try and ease the traffic flows through Inverary by taking the construction traffic from the 83 around the north of Inverary back onto the A819 before going up north. And the holding to the south is proposed for the marine facility, which we're planning to create within Loch, and this will be used for the transportation of the large indivisible loads, so such as the turbines and generators and transformers that will be coming to site, which both avoid the weak bridges and the arch in Inverary, and meaning that there's a reduced amount of traffic of heavy loads going on the public road. Next slide, please, Ross. So this embankment or example reservoir is of Meggetland, sorry, not Meggetland, Megget Reservoir, and this is a historic ACOM project we've been involved in back in the time, and this shows an example of how the main head pond embankment could look. So this is a terraced embankment, earth-filled embankment that could minimize the visual impact of the reservoir. So it's not a typical concrete buttressed dam such as Cruachan, which is quite visible from a few hills or high points. This is a more subtle design that will help try and blend the head pond into the hill and into the embankment. Next slide, please, Ross. So this is an example of how large the underground power cavern could be. So for those that have visited the Hollow Mountain and been into the visitor centre at Cruachan, you'll see photos of how the caverns were constructed and the sort of size and the scale of the underground works that we'd look to develop. So this is an example of a 6 pump turbine power station, and we're looking for something similar in configuration and similar size. Again, all underground and all out of sight. And now I'll hand over to Dave to run through the environmental constraints. Thanks, Ross.
Okay, thank you. I'll just bring you out just now, James. So many thanks for that and setting out the characteristics of the project from an engineering point of view. And David, will bring you in and just ask you to talk through some of the environmental aspects
Sure.
of the project.
No problem. So good evening, everyone. Thank you, James and Mark and Ross, the speakers so far. So as I say, my name is David Lee. I am the project manager for this project. I am not an environmental consultant. I am covering here for Victoria Deacon. So I'm just going to run through what we've done so far and the process moving forward. So we've obviously carried out some initial desk studies, and we have been doing some site investigation work in terms of surveying the area we're going to look to build in. We've obviously identified some key constraints already. As you can see, within the main site boundary itself, there isn't actually a lot of water courses, obviously. And we will submit this to the various statutory consultees when we submit scoping, and we'll get feedback from them to see what we've picked up so far, and we'll continue to investigate as we go forward. So as you can see, some of the key things we've picked up elsewhere, particularly in Inverary, things like the ancient woodland that we're aware of that we need to be careful to avoid. Obviously, just electricity transmission lines as well. So these are some of the key constraints we've picked up at the desk study stage. There will be a lot more survey work to do and more constraints to identify. And the reason we do this early on is when we start looking at the design, we try to design the scheme to be as sensitive as possible to all these constraints. So maybe nip onto the next slide, Ross. That's the same one. There we go. We've pulled this out separately, the landscape constraints, because we are building a large structure on the site for the head pond, and obviously it's important to see the visual impact that will have. So again, we'll have a look at a search area up to 15 kilometres to see where, which areas can see the infrastructure in the head pond. We're also aware there's areas of panoramic quality that we have to make sure we don't have a negative impact on. Obviously down around Inverary as well, gardens and designated landscapes. So, the design is going to have to be sensitive to these things. And this is why we engage with various parties, pre-scoping as well. As I say, that this call, as Ross introduced at the beginning, is to let the local people know about the project before anyone else, really. So, your feedback on that will be incorporated into the design as well as the other constraints we identify. So that's just a very high-level overview of some of the constraints we've identified already. Ross, you want to continue? So, what will we do next? We're looking to submit a scoping report in October 2021. That will be submitted to the Energy Consents Unit. And you'll be able to get a copy of that. You'll be able to read through it. You'll be able to provide formal feedback and ask us questions on that. We have had initial discussions with the Energy Consents Unit and Argyll and Bute Council to make them aware this project's coming and to get any initial feedback from them. So as I say, the application will go to the Scottish Ministers as a Section 36 application under the Electricity Act. And that will be around the second quarter of 2022. So, it's going to take us a long time to go through the process, to engage properly with all the different consultees, understand what survey work they'd like us to do on the site to make sure we pick up everything that's there and allows us to design the scheme properly. Do you want to move on, Ross? So this is a process that we're going to go through. Sorry, I'm going to have to move forward a little bit. My eyesight's maybe not that great. So the step one, pre-scoping, this is what we're doing just now. As I say, this is not a statutory requirement, but it's something that the developer I like to do, is to come and speak to the local community, as they've stated. Unfortunately, not face-to-face, so hopefully we'll get to see you at some point. So pre-scoping, just to make you aware that this is happening, as you are the most important, I think, stakeholders in this, being the local area. The next stage is scoping. And that's when you'll be able to give some formal feedback. We want your feedback, and it will be incorporated hopefully into the design. Hopefully you'll see that. But you still need the opportunity to formally submit your feedback to the local authority and to the Energy Consents Unit. And you have an opportunity to submit your formal feedback at step 2, scoping, after we submit a scoping opinion in October. Then step 3 is pre-application stage. This is where we'll be preparing the environmental impact assessment report, which shows the design and shows the impact the project will have on the environment, and hopefully it will be low or no impact. And if there's any impact, what mitigation we'll put in place. And again, you have the opportunity then to provide us slightly more formal feedback, because the pre-application stage and the community meetings and presentations are a statutory requirement. So hopefully by that point we'll be able to come out and speak to you all face to face, and be able to go and have some plans. We'll come up with some big A3 drawings and be able to talk through the design with you and take your feedback on board. Step 4 is a kind of formality that we do. It's a gate check to make sure that everything that we've been asked to do, we have done, and we try and demonstrate that to the Energy Consents Unit. And then finally, we'll submit the application. So they're the stage that we'll go through. And again, once the application is finally submitted, again, you'll have the opportunity to provide your formal feedback to the Energy Consents Unit. So as I say, unlike step 1 and step 3, where you probably provide your feedback directly to ourselves or to the developer, step 2 and 5 allow you to formally submit your feedback to the Energy Consents Unit. From there, the Energy Consents Unit or the statutory consultee could request further information, or we could end up in a public local inquiry if there are areas where there's a disagreement on, and following on from that, there will be a decision made by the Energy Consents Unit. After that, there'll be a decision notice issued with the planning application, with the planning permission, and step 8 is discharge. Any planning application or any planning permission we get will come with a number of conditions that have to be met. So, for example, as we go through this process, it is likely that you would like to have a local community group involved during the construction and the operation of the project, and that will be a condition that has to be met, that is legally binding, and that planning permission isn't valid unless we go through and discharge those conditions. Be things like making sure we agree on a traffic management plan, plus a lot of other different bespoke conditions that have to be discharged. I say it's one thing to say what you're going to do in your in your EIA and then your planning application, this document makes that legally binding, all the conditions, all the things that the developer said they're going to do. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. Again, if you've got any questions, you can let us know. At the end, I'll do my best to answer it in Vicky's absence. Ross, if we go on to the next slide. So community engagement, as we've said, and Ross and Mark will say as well, community engagement is very important. And you know the area better than we do. You know, we will come up and do a lot of survey work to try and understand the area and find what's there. But you've lived there. You know it a lot better than we do. So we do want your community engagement. We do want you to get on board with this. So any comments, thoughts, and inputs, you know, some key areas, accessibility, you know, recreation routes, you know, do you have a private water supply in the area? You know, water use and tourism. I think an example where we've worked on projects like this before is we think, oh, it's, you know, you look at somewhere like Crooken, it has a nice visitor centre. So we've worked on a project similar to this, and we spoke to the local community, said, well, we'll put a visitor centre, you bring some tourism in. And in fact, the feedback we got from the local community is, we don't want more tourism, we've got enough in there actually. So they didn't want a visitor centre put into the project. So, you know, that's a very, very basic thing. You know, we've also spoke with people on other projects, and they've sat around the table with us and influenced the design, you know, because of what they know. So please do give us feedback on that. There's a number of ways to do it. You can obviously submit some questions today, and we can try and answer them and have a chat at the end. You can submit an email, so pumpedstorage@acom.com. If you want to submit an email and ask us questions, you know, we're always happy to engage. There will be a website up and running. It's not up and running yet, so that'll be balliemeanoch.psh.co.uk. And you can go on that. You can, once we prepare the scoping report and we upload it, you'll be able to go on there and look at it. And I think this presentation will probably end up there as well, Ross, I think.
That's right, yeah.
That's right. So next slide, I think that might be the last slide, Ross. Oh, this is the last slide. Questions?
Yeah, so thank you very much for that, David, and just talking through the various environmental considerations that a project of this nature goes through. Obviously, there are many, and there will be extensive survey work carried out. As David said, and James as well, this is just very much the start of the process. Once we've had the initial scoping and we look to move to the formal planning application and the submission of a full environmental impact assessment study, we will have formal local events where we will, hopefully, as we say, they'll be in person, and we'll look to engage much more directly with the local community around some of the points that David has raised there, particularly some of the points that are much more or much better understood by the local community around the recreational tract, private water supplies, so on and so forth, sort of things that would be difficult to fully appreciate and understand without that local knowledge. So hopefully in due course we will get the opportunity to be out and talk around some of those points. So I think what I might do just now is just bring the rest of the team just into the screen. Got everyone now. So, wondering, Greg, if during this process, if we've had any inquiries, or any questions or queries come through?
We have had one question come in just in the last minute there, just when the questions screen come up, and it's regarding the sort of financial aspects of the proposal. So asking about what are the project capital costs, and about commercial financing without a PSH revenue model. Now, this is kind of connected to a question that we've sometimes had at our other events, about whether projects like this receive any sort of government funding or or subsidy? So I don't know who's maybe best placed to answer that, Mark. Would that maybe be
Yeah,
you?
no, I'll answer that. So yeah, if the project ends as a 1.5 gigawatt project, it's going to. There's a bit of an echo. I don't know what that's due to there. It's just suddenly came on, but there's a. It's going to cost somewhere in the region of about 2 billion to build and to have it operational, which is a huge amount of money. Now, from a point of these being subsidised, they don't require a subsidy. There's 4 pump storage projects running very well in the UK. Crooken up the road, Foyers, the ones in Scotland, all of them, but the ones in Scotland are Foyers at Loch Ness, which has gone since 1974, and Crooken since 1965, and they stand on their own 2 feet. And these new projects will stand on their own 2 feet as well. But what's required, because of that huge initial investment, and because you're talking of a 6 to 7 year construction time, investors do need some form of comfort to be able to invest that sort of equity. Now, how that's done, most people will probably have heard about interconnectors. Interconnectors are the big subsea cables that go from the UK to Europe. And there's quite a few more of those getting built at the moment. Now, how they get built, because the same sort of cost, about a couple of billion, is they have a government mechanism called a cap and floor. And that basically means what it says is you have a floor price and you have a cap, like a head price, you don't go above. Now, what that means is if the project doesn't hit a certain revenue and it goes below the floor price, then it will get additional income from the government to keep it running. And again, if it goes above, it can't go above the cap, so it can only make a certain amount of money. The UK government's looking to implement a similar thing to get long duration storage built, because at the moment there is a barrier to entry for these projects because of the huge capital cost at the front end. But as I say, these stand on their own 2 feet. So ourselves and the other player or companies that are in the market are confident that to go ahead with these projects, because they will be able to stand on their own 2 feet and not hit that cap. But the cap does need to be there just to get the projects built. The floor needs to be there to get these projects built. So they're not subsidised, but they will need a helping hand to get them started. What's very cool about this is once that happens, and we hope that'll happen, there may be an announcement for COP26. This is a huge global event. It's in Glasgow very shortly, all about climate change, about making sure we all hit our net zero targets. This project will, you're looking at 70% of this project will be construction. So that means that roughly 1.4 billion for this project alone will stay in the economy. And as we're all coming out of COVID, that'll be a huge injection into the economy. What's also extremely cool is we're looking to create well over in excess of 1,000 jobs over the next 7 years. So as well as bringing a lot of money into the country, and that's not just us, there's a number of companies doing this now. It's going to inject billions into the economy. So there's a lot of good things out with just beating climate change. It's fantastic for the economy. It's also, sorry for going on a wee bit here, but it's important. It's also going to give the country energy security, where at the moment the sort of choices are when we take all the coal and gas off the system, we're going to be completely reliant on renewables, and that's a great thing, and that is really a great thing. But as I say, when it's not windy or it's not sunny, our choices will be, well, do we use the interconnectors from Europe and bring the power in from Europe? Yes, that's an option. But well, what if it's not windy over there? Or what if they choose they need the energy and they can't give it to us? What these projects are in it will give us energy security in the country. I'm not just talking about Scotland, I'm talking about the UK as a whole. So that's extremely positive for us all going forward. But yeah, hope that answered the question a little bit more.
Thanks, Mark.
Mark, that would link into another question that we're sometimes asked, Mark, which is, well, this sounds like a huge project, large construction costs. Will this negatively impact people's energy bills? Will that add costs onto people's household bills?
Well, we've had analysis. We haven't had analysis done, but there's been analysis done by Imperial College and the Carbon Trust a few years ago, and they're looking at with energy storage coming onto the system, it's going to potentially save all the consumers billions of pounds each year. They looked at if 6 gigawatts could be put onto the system, and we're doing 2 gigawatts, but there's over 5 gigawatts in the pipeline. That could save up to, now this is just what we've read in documentation, but it could save the consumer up to £50 to £100 per consumer on their bill. It's certainly not going to cost the consumer money. We see it as a saving. So yes, it's extremely positive.
Thanks for that, Mark. So another question that we get asked quite often is just back to basics question. Why is this needed? We've got Crook in there. It's been sitting there for a while. So why now? Why is PSH a requirement in sort of today?
David or James, would you want to?
Yeah, either James, you want to answer? Do you want me to answer? It's up to you.
Oh, you go ahead, Dave.
Good. Well, you can step in with what I don't say. So, from our view, one of these is more pump storage or storage is needed. Why is storage needed? I think is either the question, and then why pump storage? So, there is more renewables on the grid, but we're at a point now where it's fairly saturated. And Mark was talking about electricity prices and grid. To put more renewables onto the grid in its current condition, you're going to have to do a lot of reinforcement or upgrades to the grid to accommodate a lot more, say, wind or solar or intermittent power supplies, really. And one of the ways to help combat that is to put storage onto the grid, and it allows us to take off to put more renewables. And so, whilst this pump storage hydro isn't a renewable project, by building it and putting more storage onto the grid, it allows you to put further deployment of renewables and move towards hitting that net zero target. So you need storage on the grid to allow for more renewables is the simple way of putting it. Now, you could say, well, we could put big lithium-ion battery sites everywhere. The problem with them is the scale and the cost. As Mark and James said at the beginning, this project could be up to 1.5 gigawatts. It's just not scalable for a lithium-ion battery to create that amount of storage. And I think the type of support it can provide the grid pump storage, it's not just about balancing. There's other clever things it can do in terms of putting things like inertia into the grid. Now, I'm a civil engineer, so I'm not going to start explaining the electrical side of it. But pump storage hydro can offer a lot of services to support the grid to allow for more renewables to be deployed. James, anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think as I was trying to say at the start is that the scale of this project relative to others that are currently sort of up and running is the key to take away. So currently, if this scheme was to be built at the size we're intending, it's 4 times larger, up to 4 times larger than Cruachan is in energy storage terms, and almost 4 times larger in installed capacity terms. So it's as the magnitude of scale of the storage for days, if not weeks, is enormous. And a sort of key driver is that lithium ion. Yeah, you'd have to mine a lot of materials to create the battery, and then during its lifetime, the lithium ion degrades, and eventually it will have to be recycled after 15 years. Whereas water doesn't degrade over time. Cruachan's still going since 1965. And it's as long as it gets looked after and there's sort of regular maintenance carried out in the pump turbines, it should keep going. And they're obviously looking to expand it and make it larger. But the pump storage has a great legacy to play in Scotland's future, and it's obviously we've got a good history of it in the area. So it really helps the penetration of renewables and helps decarbonize the grid and make everyone's kettles and toasters and electric cars less polluting if we can get more renewables on the grid and stop all the curtailment payments getting paid to the wind turbine owners.
I think, yeah, and like, thanks, James. And I think something that's important as well to fully get is since 2015 we've looked at well over 130 locations, with AECOM advising us on what is the right location that is for a multitude of reasons. And David or James will be able to give you some of those points. But there's not that many sites in the country that are suitable. We're taking 3 projects through. Our first project, which is the most advanced, is called Red John at Loch Ness. You may have heard of it, and that's now fully permitted. And when we went into this and started at Loch Ness, people thought, "Are you off your head? I mean, you're going to an area that there's hundreds of thousands of tourists every year." But we sat with the communities, and as David said, at times we'll look at the design. We changed the design for that project. We had several very positive meetings with the communities, a number of communities, and as I say, that project's now fully consented, and we'd hope to start construction in that in the next couple of years. So to have it where we're putting it, it is a good thing, and I'm hoping that when we get to meet everybody face to face, and if they have any doubts or concerns, that we'll be able to alleviate those, because we've been able to do it with other communities because we genuinely care. To give you a full insight, is in my background, I grew up on a farm in Ireland and came to Scotland. That's how I came to a farm in Scotland. So I really do understand farming communities. My whole family in Ireland are from that background, so we're very sympathetic to that, and we do listen. And if they're concerns, we will do our absolute utmost to resolve them. And that's what we're all about here.
Thanks, Mark. So we've had another couple of comments and questions. So someone's repeated a couple of times that Cruachan doesn't get any revenue from storage, and that it lives off ancillary inertia, etc., not storage. So the person's mentioned that a couple of times. I just wanted to acknowledge that. But they've also asked a question: are there better, cheaper technologies than PSH?
Well, I can quickly answer that, and then you can jump in, David. There was a report done by Jacobs just recently, a good few months ago now, but it's online, and we can certainly send it to the individual that's asking these questions. Pump storage for long duration is the cheapest form of storage compared to all other technologies. It's the most proven technology. We know it works, and that's why we're doing it, because you only live once, and we want to try and do something good here, and there's no point in us going down a road that's pie in the sky or it's never going to happen. What's the point in that? We're doing something we know will work. It's affordable and it's cost effective, and it can get funded because it's proven technology. So is there anything you'd like to add to that, David?
Not too much more, but I think, James made it's the scalability of it, it's the size of it, and what the equivalent would have to be if you were to do something like lithium-ion battery for storage. So we've, it depends what you mean by best, I suppose, but it's a difficult question. But for the size of storage that is needed, that we'd say, well, this is the best technology to be deployed in Scotland.
Thank you. So one question we get asked sometimes is to clarify. We talk about long-term storage and short-term storage. Could someone explain what those mean?
James, you want to jump in, or do you want me to go?
I'm happy. It's relatively short. So I mean, typically, short-term storage is maybe usually everything below maybe 6 hours worth, of maybe 2 to 6 hours, and anything past 6 hours is maybe defined as long-term storage. And as mentioned, this project could generate full capacity for up to 30 hours. But if you half the installed capacity, it could go for twice as long, could go for 60 hours. So we're well into the long-term storage point of view. And if we're storing weeks worth of electricity, surplus electricity from high wind speeds or storms that are sweeping across the country, we can keep that stored in the head pond. And coming back to the question on the different revenue streams, of the larger your battery, potentially you could get more system services being able to be deployed in the scheme, because you've got more chunks of energy you could deploy or keep as within the reservoir. And the more you've got, the more you can play with. So there's a long storage element, but there's also there's a different revenue streams as well. But that's also not to say that the scheme could generate in the short-term market for periods of an hour or two or three, because it can do, and they can maybe jump up to full speed within 90 seconds or so. So it's all down to the size of your battery and how you divvy it up, or you change the size of the installed capacity, or how much you're needing at the time. But yeah, there is a difference there, but we can feed into both markets.
Thanks. So another question, just to clarify some of the terms that we've used, but we've mentioned tail pond, head pond, upper reservoir, lower reservoir. We've named specific water bodies. Can you maybe just explain? I think some of those terms are interchangeable. Can you maybe explain some of those as well?
Yes, so that's fine. That's fine to do that. So when I was trying to describe the head pond, it can be called as a upper reservoir if it's an already existing impoundment that is a reservoir, or the lower reservoir that's already impounded. But it's either head pond, tail pond, or upper reservoir, lower reservoir. It's just defining the two different water bodies. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does.
Just to make it even more general, the tail pond will be Loch. That'll be the lower pond, and then we'll be creating an upper pond, an upper reservoir up in the mountains, and then everything is tunnels underground, with just the visuals you've seen earlier, with the cavern, with the turbines all underground. So when you come along to some of the community meetings down the road, you'll see we'll have more visuals at that point. We'll be able to show you how little it actually impacts the landscape.
Thank you. So another question that we're sometimes asked is to do with the excavated material. So people are maybe familiar with the energy sort of cavern at Crooken, and understand how big the tunnels are. So there's a lot of stuff taken out. And what happens to that?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. So as mentioned when I was describing the above and below ground features of the scheme, we're proposing that all the material arising from the underground works, so the tunnelling and blasting, will be stored on site, and the idea is to utilise the materials in the engineered features, such as the embankment, head pond embankment. So all the material that will come out of the tunnels, come out of the holes in the ground, will be used within the head pond to construct the embankments. So that's the idea.
I think that the key thing is the trying to keep all the material on site, isn't it? I think that's a design challenge that we like to set ourselves. Well, we like to set ourselves. ILI like to set us. They want to try and be sustainable, minimise traffic movements and all that. So I think that's a good challenge for us to be set. So one for James and I to scratch our heads with.
Excellent, thanks.
Greg, would you like to? Because this is something this is a good thing for people to be thinking about. Is we've done a lot of very positive things for the local area for Red John at Loch Ness. Do you mind just going over some of those from the walks and such?
Yeah, if you bear with me a couple of minutes, Mark, I'll dig that out so that I can give people the right information. But in the meantime, I was hoping you could answer a question about CO2 savings. So we've said this is not a renewable energy project, but we facilitate renewable energy and the further expansion of renewable energy. So do we know at this stage an estimate of the CO2 savings that can result from this project?
James, you go.
Yeah. Short answer is we don't at this stage, because we're at a very early stage of the design. Sort of maybe longer-winded answer is that the way that this scheme works regarding sort of saving carbon is basically a fundamental offset from how dirty the grid is currently, i.e. the thermal power that's needing to be switched on just now to service the peaks in demand. So gas and coal, for example, last week we had a huge, there was coal turned on in the grid for the first time in a while because the gas prices were so high. But if there was more storage on the grids, then you could have taken that surplus wind electricity, which is zero carbon in theory, and then deployed it on the grid, offsetting the dirty polluters of the thermal power that would have had to turn on anyway. So it's the estimates when you work it out, it's based on the current grid intensity. So how much carbon or grams of carbon is emitted currently on the grid for every kilowatt hour of electricity. So the higher that value, or the average value that is, then the better the scheme would be for sort of offsetting that. But as the grid decreases in carbon intensity, then in theory, then to make the difference becomes harder and harder. The problem is it's the intermittency of the clean power and getting that stable supply and baseload that's difficult to get into the grid. So I hope that made sense.
I mean, I think it is quite complicated, but what I would add is we will, in the environmental impact assessment report, there will be a carbon assessment and climate change chapter. That's specifically Question Nature Scotland. It's something we've done for John as well. So we will calculate the carbon that's, because obviously we need to build the project. So you'll look at how much carbon is released from building it and how much you save by building it, and then there'll be a comparison of that. So there will be a standalone chapter in an environmental impact assessment report that demonstrates that.
Yeah, and I think I'm right in saying for the Red John project during the public local inquiry, this was a question that was investigated by the reporter for the Scottish Government, and the figure that was settled on there was 45 million tonnes of CO2 saved across the lifetime of the project. So that's significant savings, and that's a much smaller project, comparatively speaking to what we're proposing here. So yeah, there's significant CO2 savings to be made there. Mark, you had asked me some of the benefits that came from Red John, our first consented project up in the Highlands. So this again had been a question that the reporter had asked during the public local inquiry process. Was the reporter wanted to understand the other benefits, the net benefits of the project. So there's all the benefits that we've spoke about, that it meets demand and that it improves power system flexibility and stability and resilience. These are all benefits. But we also did lots of things locally, like we enhanced biodiversity. We created new wetlands in the area, and there was large areas to be replanted with native woodland. We took away a lot of the commercial forestry and replaced that with a sort of Scottish broadleaf woodland. We were setting out to actively manage the ancient woodland that was affected. We've made various ecological enhancements and made sure there was a permanent biodiversity legacy. We've already spoke about construction jobs and the economic benefit, supporting the local community. But for Loch Ness, one of the things we did was we've offered an area of ground for a jetty for water taxis to cross the Loch, to help to connect communities and to improve tourism and economic connections. We are paying for a school minibus for during construction, but that's also a legacy benefit that goes to the community after construction's finished. They get to keep that. We improved walking and recreational paths around the site, around and through the site, and educational boards to create an educational opportunity there as well. Yeah, I think that sort of covers a broad range of the further benefits that were identified during the public inquiry process that extend beyond just the benefits to the grid.
I was just going to say, Greg, and most of them were, between Balliemeanoch, and we didn't make them up. That was what the local community kind of wanted, wasn't it?
Yeah, so one of the overwhelming responses from the community at this very early stage where we consulted the community was to do with the commercial forestry that was on the site. And that goes through a process of being felled and being replanted. People wanted to see an end to that, and native broadleaf planting put there in its place, and that was one of the things we set out to do. And actually the report identified that as one of the key benefits of the project, and that was something that the community brought to us, which we were able to incorporate in. So hopefully via this process, as we have more of these events and people get in touch with us, then hopefully there's some opportunities that we can incorporate into this project as well. We have had another question that's to do with how the site will be accessed. And we had a visual for this. I don't know, maybe Ross, if it's possible to get it back on the screen. And then James, I think maybe you'd be best to answer this.
That's fine. So if you maybe go back to the proposed development boundary, Ross.
Now this links back to another question that we got asked early on in our other projects, which was, when will we know the full extent of traffic impacts? It's a very early stage of the proposals, but when will we get an idea of the full extents?
Well, to take that last question first, maybe to the full, once the EIA is sort of underway, we'll have an idea of the traffic volumes anticipated at different stages during the construction, and we'll engage with the consultees and Transport Scotland on the volumes we're anticipating, and we'll get feedback on the potential mitigation that we have to go through, and the constraints on the public network. We won't know that until we start going through the process.
What slide were we looking for again? Sorry, Greg.
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
This one?
That's the one. Yep.
So the head pond that's been shown previously is that black circle. So it's sort of located up on the hill, and the two corridors, red corridors, thicker corridors from the north and south. So the proposed access routes for general construction traffic from the A819. There is obviously the existing Loch side road that goes down the east side of Loch, and we're proposing not to use that for the construction traffic, and have the bulk of the construction traffic coming from the east. And to get onto the A819, there's two access routes around Inverary, as we discussed earlier, on one for the abnormal indivisible loads, so the large loads coming from the Loch to the south, and the general construction traffic bypassing Inverary to the north along existing tracks. So that's the overview of unplanned construction routes.
Okay, and I think it's worth saying as well at this stage that we don't know anything. Nothing's sort of set in stone, and that we're scoping these access routes to highlight whether they're feasible and practical. And once the full EIA is complete and we've got our consultation responses back, then we'll have a better picture of exactly where the access is going to be coming in and out. But at this stage, this is what we're investigating. Does that sound about right?
Yep, it says there's proposed development boundary just now.
Yeah. The other thing is,
sorry, Greg. I think it's just important to note there, because I'm just putting myself in other people's shoes. Is there's no getting away from it. There is going to be a disturbance with traffic over that period, but as we hopefully will demonstrate, we were able to alleviate people's fears and concerns at our Loch Ness project. So we're confident we're going to be able to do similar remedies at this project as well. So I can understand people's concerns, but you've got to look at the bigger picture. This is a project that's going to make a big impact on helping us get to net zero and helping us fight climate change. And I mean, there's just no getting away from that. That's the world we're living in just now, and it is reality. So yeah, it's not just we're not gonna sit here and tell you that nothing's going to change. There are going to be changes over a period of time, and then once the project is constructed, you literally will not know it's there, like when you drive past Crooken, except that there's a visitor centre there, so there's people that go purposely to look at that every day. So I just felt that was important to say that.
Thanks, Mark. Just going to bring up the point that PSH projects are considered national developments under the Scottish planning policy, and national developments are considered especially important to sort of future sustainable economic growth of Scotland. And other developments that fall into that category was the North Queensferry crossing and the Dundee waterfront enhancements that took place there. So we're considered a key project for Scotland to meet its energy targets and our CO2 reduction targets. So we fall into that category. We're that scale of project. So I just wanted to mention that, because I think once the application goes in, it will mention the phrase national development. I just wanted to make sure people understood what that was. One other thing I was just wanting to check. We touched on it previously, but it was, can someone from AECOM tell us a little bit about the in-house expertise that you have there? So we're getting to meet a couple of you tonight, but I know that there's a massive team supporting you behind you. Can you just maybe explain a little bit about that?
Sure. So obviously we've wheeled out the best experts this evening, in James, myself, and Amy. If anyone on the call, actually, we're all based in Scotland. We work at the Edinburgh office, well, near the Edinburgh office at the moment in the houses, but we're all based in Edinburgh. And the benefit we have in AECOM, in Scotland in particular, is we have all of the specialist consultants that we need based in Edinburgh and our Glasgow office, actually. So that's environmental specialists who look at ecology, ornithology, landscape and visual. The people who like the EIA, the ports, we've got geologists looking at the ground conditions. We've got carbon experts who help with the carbon balance assessment. So we have a multidisciplined team on the environmental side who prepare those documents. And this is obviously why ILI have come to someone like AECOM, because it's all done in-house, and they are specialists who are trying to protect the environment. You know, at the end of the day, if they go out and find something and they do an assessment, that is a professional view on it. And we then as designers have to try and mitigate that and to develop a project that doesn't have a negative impact. You know, we get challenged, James and I and Amy, when we're doing the design, by the internal environmental consultants a lot to make sure we come up with the best design that won't have a negative impact. So that's on the environmental side. On the engineering side, again, we have a lot of in-house specialists, from tunnelling to mechanical and electrical people who speak to the turbine suppliers. We also, given the type of project this is and the specialities of it, we lean on our international people, colleagues in AECOM as well. So we work closely with our Canadian colleagues who've built a lot of hydro projects over the years. So we work with them. We have some specialist dam engineers who are again based in Edinburgh as well, who they support other parts of AECOM as well globally. So we've got that kind of global engineering knowledge that we apply to the project, and then we have the local environmental specialists. By local, I mean Scotland local. So we have that, the Scottish and UK knowledge from the environmental teams, and then James and I bring it, and Amy bring in the engineering side, and we can lean on the international experts. So we have hundreds of engineers, thousands of engineers and environmental specialists that can work on this project. Myself, James and Amy have worked with ILI for a number of years, and we're trying to apply the same team on all these projects. So we will work on the Red John scheme, and things that we've learnt there and developing that we take on to the next scheme. So hopefully every time we develop better, we engage better, and we learn as we go as well. You never stop learning, and we always try and do that. So hopefully we can demonstrate that as we go through the project, that we know what we're talking about, and we're listening to what you're saying, and we're taking on board your comments. Does that cover your question, Greg? Did I miss any other specialties?
No, I think you covered everything there. I think as well we could mention that this is our second project, or third actually, to start through the planning process, but we received a consent earlier this year, and the full suite of chapters, EIA chapters, is available online. It's available, I think, through clicking through our own website. So it gives people an idea of the full range and depth and detail that's involved in all the various assessments. So it's certainly worth going to look at for people who are interested in this project. I've had another comment on the website. It's a comment rather than a question. Scottish Government does not decide PSH revenue policy. That is correct. I'll maybe see if Mark wants to come in on that, but that's certainly the case. Scottish Government is pulling the levers available to it to try and get more PSH and more storage into the system to help and improve sort of energy security. But it is true to say that the UK government decide sort of a lot of the revenue decisions are taken at the UK government level. I don't know, Mark, if you want to comment on that at all.
Yeah, so absolutely correct. So Scottish Government will decide planning, and as I say, our project that just went through Red John there. There was some fabulous, very positive comments about it from the government, but for market mechanisms, that's all done by the UK government, and we've been working closely with them also for the last few years, and they brought out what's called a call for evidence just recently there for long duration storage, so that all the main companies that are involved in this would comment and make sure that the mechanism that they put out works for all the different technologies, not just pump storage hydro. This is for long duration storage, as James said, anything over sort of 6 hours of storage. So as we said earlier, we are hopeful that the government may announce this at COP26 in Glasgow, the big climate change conference, very shortly. But if not, we're very confident they will announce it early next year. But it's absolutely vital that we bring energy storage to the system. It's no joke. If we don't, the lights will go out, undoubtedly, or we continue to put on the coal plant and keep running the gas, and then we affect climate change, and in another 20, 30 years, we're sitting in Scotland with 50 degrees summers, that's it. I mean, that's reality. So these things need to happen, and we're very proud that we're playing a small part in making it happen.
Thanks, Mark. So I just wanted to. We're 10 minutes away from the end. It looks to me as though someone has recently joined the website. So I believe if they click play, it might take them to the very start, or it might jump in to this sort of questions and answer stage just now. So I'm just going to speak to those people directly and say that there's if you hover your cursor over the video, a red line appears at the bottom. You can click on that and drag it back, and you're able to see the whole presentation. It's about an hour and a half, an hour and 20 minutes or so of that. And if you come back to this website at another time, this video is going to be it's going to stay on the website, and it's going to be accessible there, so you can watch it again, and you'll be able to get in touch with us. Now, one of the other questions I was going to go to is how do we get in touch? How do people make contact with us? Who do they make contact with? Can someone maybe answer that?
So I can bring up the presentation.
Yeah, if you go to the last slide, Ross, but you can email us at ACOM. The email address is pumpedstorage@acom.t. Well, let's double check it before I tell you the wrong email address. Always sensible.
So
I just wanted to make the point as well, is that this isn't your last opportunity to see this project or to ask questions or to get information. This is the very, very start. This is us just sort of reaching out really for the first time and trying to engage with the community. So that there will be lots of opportunities to ask questions later. That's the addresses on the screen now, David, I think.
Yeah, so the email is pumpstorage@acom.com. So you can submit questions at any point, and we tend to get back to you quite quickly. We're hoping that normally within a week or so, depending on how difficult the question is. As I said, and this is mainly you can use this for any sort of communication, anything informal, any question that might pop into your head. But I don't know, Ross, if you go back a slide, just to remind people that if you can have formal feedback that goes to the energy consent unit. You might want to say, okay, I'm going to speak direct to them. So at step 2 and at step 5, you will have the opportunity when we submit scoping and when we submit the EIA report. You will have the opportunity to submit formal feedback on the report then. And I say stages, step 1, which is the pre-scoping now, you can talk informally to us and ask questions. And also when we do the community events and exhibitions, you'll be able to give us some feedback then as well, and speak to us face to face. But that email address will be available right the way through this process.
Yeah, I think I'm right in saying, David, as well, there's a scoping report is concluded after scoping that accompanies the planning application. That explains the public consultation events that we've done and the feedback that we get back. But if the public still at that point want to participate and make representations, they can do that to the Energy Consent Unit and also to the local planning authority through their planning portal. And then the planners, when they're preparing their report to the planning committee, they'll summarise all of the public representations that they've received, and they'll be available online, so the public can see everything. Everything's all done out in the open, and local councillors and elected members can also see all the representations that are there. So there's plenty of opportunities coming up to engage as much as you want with the process. And also to influence the process. So we touched on this earlier, but the project that we did at Loch Ness evolved quite a lot from this sort of pre-scoping stage. It went through various iterations before we settled on the final project design. And that's something that happens as a result of the scoping process, from the feedback that we get from the consultees. But also with that project, it was influenced largely by members of the public as well. So I just want to say it's definitely worth getting in touch with us and keeping your eye out for other events like this. And ILI will be in touch. We've got, I'm not sure how many community councils we reached out to, Ross, and got in contact with. It was a handful, I think.
Yeah.
And
So every community council within the wider area, we did reach out to as part of this initial round of community engagement. And as we say, this is very much targeted towards the local community. This is out with the kind of formal consultee process or anything like that. So it's just very much putting the project out there to the local community to give you an opportunity to see what it is that's being proposed, to set out the various steps that will be undertaken from this point, to introduce you to the team, to make you aware of how you can contact us and pass comment on the project itself. But this is just very much the starting point. As we say, once the scoping report is complete, we'll have the website up and running by that point, a dedicated website for this project. The scoping report will be accessible from there, as will the scoping opinion once that has been received. And then when the formal planning application and environmental impact assessment are complete and due for submission, they'll also be accessible through the website, plus a variety of information just around the project characteristics and the various stages and steps and where the project's sitting. And there's also an inquiry function that will be built into the website as well, so that questions or queries can be raised directly through the website itself, which will come through to the team and will be passed round to the relevant people to ensure a full and complete answer is provided. But yes, I think the key point is we're very keen for engagement. We're very keen for people to get involved and to give us their opinion, because it genuinely does make a difference. It genuinely does get used to shape the project and to ensure that the best project that's available is what is ultimately developed. So that's what we're very keen to achieve. And for people to give us their thoughts, give us their opinions, to feedback to us, and for that to feed into the wider design and the development of the project. So we're not just saying it, we are very keen for people to get involved and for this to be a process whereby your opinion is very much sought and will be used to inform the project going forward.
Can I just finish on that, Ross, and say that in this videos, as Ross mentioned earlier, this has been recorded and it's available to everyone that's watching this evening. And generally, we do mean it. Please pass the video on to all your friends and family in the local area and ask them if they don't mind just watching it and getting their view, because we really want you to come along to the live meetings and meet all of you. And I mean, please excuse my passion. Sometimes some people can think I'm just a bit much, but it is passion at what we do. We live and breathe it. And we're keen to get to know the community, because we're going to be there for a long time and build some good relationships. Really, that is what we're all about. So I'd just like to thank you all for taking the time to come on this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I was just about to also extend a thanks to the people who have engaged with us tonight and who've asked us questions. But just as I was about to do that, someone from one of the community councils has thanked us for all our responses. So thanks to you for coming along, and thanks, guys. I think that's us. That's us at the end of our presentation or our meeting tonight. That's 8:30. I think we've covered everything that I was wanting to cover in terms of how everyone can get in contact with us and how they can access this video so that they can review it again. So I'm not sure there's much more to add, Mark, unless you've any final words that you want to say.
No, just as I say, please come along to the meetings, and we look forward to meeting everyone. And thank you very much for your time this evening.
Excellent. No, thanks again, Mark, and everyone else for helping us put on this event this evening. Thank you for everyone who's joined in live and engaged with the process. I will send out an email again to all the parties I contacted initially, just with this link again, that will take you now into the recorded version of the meeting. And as we say, please do share that around the community. And we look forward to engaging with you further going forward. So many thanks once again.